Thanks. Okay, well, thanks, Terry, for the introduction. So today I'm going to talk about the carrier Wi-Fi networks of the future, and in particularly about three aspects that I think are critical to the success of these carrier Wi-Fi networks. And these are connectivity, coverage, and the actual adoption of the cloud. So let me get started and first talk about connectivity, since it's the main reason for the deployment of these networks. And what I want to say, and you've seen this kind of data in the past, and what this shows is the increasing demand in connectivity over time. And the important thing I would like to point out from this graph is that more than half of the traffic would be carried out over Wi-Fi. And this is equally true when you talk about smartphones that also have available to them other technologies like cellular. You still get more than half of that traffic on Wi-Fi. So you would think that you have all this traffic going through Wi-Fi, that our experience connecting to these networks would be much better than what it actually is. Because as we all know and we experience in the day-to-day, the connectivity experience is still far from great. At home, we pretty much have figured it out, right? We configured our Wi-Fi network. It's one set. You may have some coverage problems, but all in all, it works pretty well. But try getting outside the home, right, and going to a restaurant, to any other hospitality industry place. You end up asking for passwords everywhere, or much worse, you actually end up looking for codes printed on receipts and things of that sort. So it's really not working for the user's point of view. So what are we doing about all these things, and where do we think that we're going to be in the future? And what we foresee is that carrier-grade hotspots are actually going to take over, right? And you can see here in the graph the progression over time, how in 2017 we already have the crossover, right? We usually unmanaged access points really get replaced by carrier-grade hotspots. And by 2020, we're already at 90%. And what I also wanted to point out is that 92% of operators are actually going to have, or say they will have, a next-generation hotspot network by 2018. So this is really taking off, and obviously this is going to have an impact on connectivity. Technology is also doing their fair share, right? So we see how the adoption of Hotspot 2.0 is now going to be over 6 million, right, by 2020. So we do see, as Mary was saying, hopefully this will endlessly, not continue endlessly into the future and actually take off. And we will start seeing improvement in seamless connectivity pretty soon. Also, another piece of data that I wanted to remark on is the fact that by 2020, you're going to see 80% of the hotspots that are going to be shipped are going to be 802.11ac Wave 2. And obviously, that's going to improve significantly the availability of the power and connectivity that we need. But not everything is Wi-Fi. Obviously, we're all here at the Wireless Broadband Alliance. And we see that there are other technologies that are actually contributing to the ecosystem. And I'm not going to get here into discussions whether LAA, LWA, Wi-Fi will prevail. I think the important thing that needs to come across is coexistence between these technologies. I think we're going to need the capacity, and if we really want to address the connectivity problem, we really have to have these technologies coexist and work together. And I think service providers are actually going this way, as you can see, for the level of investments that are forecasted for the future, and also pretty nice growth rates. So I would like to go to the Slido and get you vote on some of these things, if you could put it up. And now that we talked about these problems with connectivity, I would like to get your opinion on who should be in control, or where do you think we should put the most effort when talking about the connectivity experience? Is it going to be on the network side of things? So that is the Hotspot 2.0, ANDSF servers, things of the sort. Is it going to be on the mobile app, maybe? Or do we think that actually the mobile OS is going to take over? We all know it's complicated to work on some of the things with iOS, closed ecosystems. So I would definitely like to get your input on that. Also, let's not forget that we can let the user decide, because sometimes the phone tries to do the connectivity association for you, and maybe that's not what you really intended. OK, well, thanks for voting. Interesting. So let me tell you now, if I go back to the slide, what we are doing in this arena. And we've chosen to go after the mobile app, not because we don't believe in the answer you most gave, which is the network, but because we think that with the Hotspot 2.0 initiatives and the WBA effort, and the ANDSF and all these technologies, I think the network side is pretty much going to be taken care of. But we do think that there is room for improvement on the mobile app side of things. And what we've been doing at Fon is actually putting together an enhanced connectivity solution where we look at different types of input parameters to make the connectivity decision. Right? So the first one of those is performance. And what we do is we do a series of passive measurements on the device to help us understand if the hotspot is actually carrying traffic correctly. So if we have in our hands some rogue hotspot or bad hotspot, we will not enforce that connectivity. The second parameter we want to look at, or we actually look at in the app, is the environment. And by environment, I here refer to the radio environment. So that's the Wi-Fi signals available, the power they have, how is the device perceiving them. And in order to analyze those and help us make the connectivity decision. And the third parameter we look at are actually the way to input business rules into this. And by business rules, I mean things like what visited network provider should I be connected to? You know, if I'm an AT&T customer, what is my preferred provider? And the service provider in that way can configure what they want the user experience to be and who they choose. And within these business rules, also we introduce the user component. So we all know that we have different user profiles, right? There's people that want to be connected to Wi-Fi no matter what, because they're more cost conscious or they don't have roaming plans. There's other people that would value more the quality of experience than the actual Wi-Fi connectivity. So you can set those kinds of profiles into the app and factor them into making the connectivity decision. Another thing we're doing is also trying to manage the reconnections, right? You know, it's really annoying when your phone keeps going and trying to reconnect to networks that you're not going to be able to access. And for this, we use a couple of criteria, and one of them is the mobility. So if somebody is moving really fast, and there's libraries on the device that will tell you if somebody is actually moving really fast or in transport, you are likely to use a different algorithm or different values that are going to help you make that connectivity decision. And those are presumably going to be different from the ones that you use when you're walking or you're not moving or you're going slow. And the other criteria we're using is the density, right? So you can imagine that if you are in an area where you have a high number of hotspots, you may want to be prompted a lot of the times to change your connectivity. So that has to be encompassed in the app to make sure that you do not get stuck on a useless connection, right? And it will be different, again, from in a low coverage situation. So before I move to that, and I think the slide is slightly out of order, but it doesn't matter. What we've been talking about until now are methods to connect the user seamlessly, right? So it's somebody else governing that connection. But when you need interaction, you actually need to make it simple. And what we have here is we recently announced last week an agreement with Microsoft, by means of which we enable payment through the Windows Store. So sometimes you need to pay for access to these networks. And the networks that are here are the Fon roaming networks from our ISP partners. We usually charge for access to those to the public when they're not ISP customers. So what we do here is that now in every single Windows device, Windows 10 device, you'll just have to input your store credentials, and you don't have to worry anymore about filling long registration forms, pulling out your credit card. So you really want to improve on this experience and make it as easy for the user as possible. So with that, I conclude with a slide with the section in connectivity, and I want to move on to coverage. Right? And the second item I said I was going to discuss is how much coverage do we need for some of these applications of the future that have been mentioned before, right? And there's a lot of scenarios here shown here. We've talked in the conference, like IoT, Internet of Things, smart cities. And some of these scenarios, obviously, on this slide are meant more for mobility, so maybe they're not that well suited to carrier Wi-Fi. But some of the others definitely are, right? So first, before I move on, I would also like to poll on your opinion. And given that IoT is going to be one of the topics of choice, what network do you think the IoT devices are going to use the most? And here I'm distinguishing home Wi-Fi from carrier Wi-Fi, even though carrier Wi-Fi may be in the home, meaning just your private signal at home. Do you think it will be mobile technologies? Do you think that other networks, and here I include the personal area networks, like Bluetooth and things of the sort? Interesting. So most of the people, I'll give you a couple of seconds more for the vote. Most of the people think that that is going to be the home Wi-Fi. Well, thanks. Let me move on. There you go. OK, so here's not the right answer, but some insight on the answer to that question. And you can see how the forecasted data here, what predicts is that the IoT is going to have an immense growth rate. And the vast majority of these connections, you were right, are going to include, or are going to occur instead on unlicensed wireless frequencies, right? And among these, we see Wi-Fi or carrier Wi-Fi in a way to play a key role. And it's important the distinction I made before between home Wi-Fi and carrier Wi-Fi, because you may think of applications, well, normal applications like, I don't know, some appliance communicating with the internet, and it's fine if it uses the home Wi-Fi. But there are going to be some applications, like for example, the utilities meters sending information out. You definitely don't want anybody messing with that. You definitely don't want the user actually tampering into the measurements that are sent out by those. So carrier Wi-Fi, we believe, will have a service opportunity here where it can leverage their actual footprint to engage with these companies and provide, actually acquire revenue. So what are the service providers doing? Or what do we think they're going to do to obtain this coverage? And what we see happening is that they're going to be massive deployments of home spots, more than 350 million instead. And of those, many of those are going to be 802.11ac by 2019. So these are massive coverage. It's going to be massive coverage available for everybody to use these networks. And these are also going to be complemented by public Wi-Fi access points. And by 2019, we're going to see about 11 million of those. And I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, because previously some of these initiatives were discussed. I just wanted to point out here that service providers have challenges here. And since there is a need for this coverage and this connectivity everywhere, and there's gaps, other companies are jumping in, and even the government, and trying to put their initiatives in place so that people can get this coverage. And again, the user has to remain at the center. We talked before about the citizen being important. So all these companies have stepped in and trying to fill these gaps. So now I want to get you thinking about how will we measure coverage, right, in the future? Because you see, including myself, and of course Terry in the introduction mentioned it, we tend to refer to these networks as we have 10,000 hotspots, we have 20 million hotspots, we have 10 million hotspots. But in reality, this is not a great measure of coverage, right? So what we've done at Fon is actually try to get an idea of the coverage, but from the point of view of the user, right? And what we do is with a mobile device, we actually go and measure. And here you have two identical pictures on the left and right. The left just shows the location that we think the hotspot is at, and the right shows the coverage or heat map. And here, darker colors are better, right? So you can see how those hotspots actually cover the area. And you can think about the many applications we can do with this, but we definitely feed this data into the service provider. And for example, they can use it for network planning purposes. You can see how at some stage you can fill your coverage gaps. You can think how you can push this into the customer care people. Maybe there's areas in the city in your 20 million hotspots of 15 that are not getting coverage. And you definitely want to know that. So let me move now, after we talk about coverage, about the adoption of the cloud. And we all know about the benefits of cloud, especially in carrier Wi-Fi. Right? You get reduced total cost of ownership because you don't have to do the upfront investment. You actually get the benefits of having a centralized management plane, and you gain the flexibility and reduce the upgrade cycles, right? So, and this is not carrier Wi-Fi picture, just from the industry in general. What this shows is that actually the transition to the cloud is being made, right? And they forecast that basically it's 2-to-1 in 2016. We're going to be going to parity in 2020. So the digital platforms that the CSPs are incorporating are definitely getting a lot of attention. And we expect that this is going to be the case again as well for carrier Wi-Fi. So the first, what I think it's important about these cloud solutions, that we have to take into account the service provider's environment or operational framework, right? We can't expect that every service provider move to the cloud and just have standalone applications, right? They live in a specific operational framework, right? They have to build their users. They have to charge them for the service. They have to provide customer care. They want the data to go into their BI or big data systems. And they have to provision the services the way they do it today. So what's important is that we use these Wi-Fi service management solutions that vendors like us commercialize in order to establish a tightly linked ecosystem that can serve all these needs and facilitate the move to the cloud. See, there you go. And the second aspect of cloud, I talked about the benefits about service agility, total cost of ownership reduction, is on the revenue side. And we can see that many CSPs or service providers have adopted a marketplace approach to software as a service. So they're actually selling and generating revenue from these applications. And you can see that these are not small amounts, right? They're in the billions range. And the estimated growth rate just for this year is about 20%. So how does this relate really to carrier Wi-Fi? Can we actually extract revenue using cloud carrier Wi-Fi? Well, what we think is that with this centralized service management platform, what you can do is actually start offering Wi-Fi as a service, right? And you have this holistic platform, all-encompassing, that you can actually slice and deliver personalized services to many verticals. So this can be coffee shops, hotel chains, municipalities. And here I drew the residential network because, again, this is the holistic picture for the carrier, right? And what you can do is to actually personalize the service. So you see a coffee shop chain can have, as a chain, some brand images, some advertisements, some promotions, but they can be individualized at the location level, right? And this tiered structure actually extends forever. So you can have sons and daughters of that structure and make essentially every experience different. And of course, every vertical different, and customize it to what the customer needs. And we have a success case, even though it's still early, in Spain with Vodafone, right, who adopted this kind of product, this kind of service management platform, to actually deploy a proposition for the small businesses, for the restaurants. And what they did is they went to them and they say, well, what about on top of your broadband, I can actually give you guest Wi-Fi as a service. That way you get Wi-Fi for all your guests, I manage it, and you don't have to worry about anything. And what they did is just that, and they put a price on that of €6 a month, and it's been fairly successful. And what they do is they share with the venue owner or with the restaurant owner credentials for the platform. You can actually set the right level of permissions so that they can configure their own service and still get a great experience out of this. So just to conclude and bringing it all together, what I wanted to say is that these Wi-Fi service management platforms really enable operators to deploy, operate, and manage their Wi-Fi service, right? So they are actually a way to see the whole carrier Wi-Fi network as a whole. So you can maintain the connectivity experience no matter where you are. You can easily add your coverage because you slice the networks, but they're all connected. And finally, you can leverage all the advantages to the cloud, right? So you can basically get all the service agility and the direct revenue from customers that you expect. And with that, I want to finish my talk, and I want to thank you for your attention. Terry.